In the Middle East, on one side, Yemeni forces are attacking ships passing through the Red Sea, causing chaos in global shipping lanes. On the other side, Iran has fired more than 300 suicide drones and missiles on Israel. The Middle East seems to be in a constant state of conflict, with violence erupting every other day in Syria, Palestine, Iraq, or Yemen. This trend is likely to continue for the foreseeable future. Beyond the Middle East, other countries are also involved in these clashes, including the United States, the United Kingdom, and Russia. But why is this so? Why does all this fighting only happen in the Middle East? The Middle East is entangled in a complex web of issues due to the presence of diverse populations with differing ideologies. These groups sometimes fight on the same side and sometimes against each other, hindering any progress toward peace. To understand the root cause of these issues, we need to go back a century to the beginning of the 20th century, when a large part of today's Europe, including the Middle East, was under the control of the Ottoman Empire. After ruling the region for 600 years, the Ottoman Empire had become weak and internal conflicts began to arise. The empire encompassed people of many religions, including Muslims, who lived in their own regions or provinces. However, all these provinces were part of the Ottoman Empire, meaning there was no freedom to create a separate country. During this time, the British also began establishing their control over some parts of the Middle East, including East India. The British needed access to their protectorates in India and the Middle East. Egypt was particularly important because it contained the Suez Canal, a crucial waterway connecting the Red Sea to the Mediterranean Sea. The British prioritized protecting the Suez Canal at all costs. The British gradually made Oman and Kuwait their protectorates. Protectorates are states that are technically independent but under British protection and control. These actions by the British angered the Ottoman Empire, which did not appreciate outside powers controlling their territories. As World War I loomed, the Ottoman Empire decided to side with Imperial Germany against the British. In response, the British and French, who had already established protectorates in Arab countries, made a secret agreement to defeat the Ottoman Empire and divide its territories amongst themselves after the war. In 1916, British and French diplomats Sir Mark Sykes and François-Georges Picot signed a secret treaty dividing the Ottoman Empire's territories. This treaty, known as the Sykes-Picot Agreement, outlined that the UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, northeastern Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait would become direct British colonies. Meanwhile, northeastern Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and Jordan would be independent Arab states but remain British protectorates. Turkey and Lebanon would become direct French colonies, while Syria and Iraq would become French protectorates. Eastern Turkey would be overseen by the Russian Empire. Palestine, due to its significant religious importance, would be declared an international administration under the Sykes-Picot Agreement. The Sykes-Picot Agreement fundamentally disregarded the existing tribal makeup of the region. The Ottomans had divided the area into provinces based on religion, and while these groups practiced different faiths, they coexisted under Ottoman rule with no established nations. The British and French, however, made a grave mistake by failing to consider these existing social structures. The consequences of this oversight would have a lasting impact on the entire Middle East. The problems began even before World War I, when the British made promises to the Arabs in exchange for their support against the Ottoman Empire. The Arabs were enticed with the idea of having their own independent countries after the war. However, the British had also made another promise to the Jewish people living in Europe, who faced widespread persecution. The British promised the Jews a homeland in Palestine if they aided the Allied victory in World War I. Another crucial factor during World War I was the need for oil. The British were the first to discover oil in Iran in 1908, but the reserves were not substantial. The war demanded vast quantities of oil for tanks, airplanes, vehicles, and other machinery. At the time, the United States was the world's largest oil producer, but the British wanted to avoid dependence on the US, especially since President Woodrow Wilson strongly opposed colonialism after the war. The British and French already had plans for their colonies, so the US was not a reliable option for oil supplies. Therefore, the British focused their efforts on exploring for oil in the region near Iran, where they believed significant reserves existed. Their hunch proved correct, and they discovered vast oil deposits in the area. Following the Allied victory in World War I, the victorious nations convened to redraw the map of the Middle East. The Ottoman Empire was officially dissolved in 1922. On October 29, 1923, Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, a Turkish military officer, declared Turkey a republic. The newly formed Turkish government resisted foreign control and continued fighting the Allies for the next 2 years. Exhausted from World War I and facing stiff resistance from the Turkish forces, the British and French were forced to negotiate. This resulted in a revised map of the Middle East, which ultimately benefited Turkey. The Allies ceded territory to Turkey, while the remaining parts of the former Ottoman Empire were divided among themselves. Previously separate Ottoman provinces, Basra, Baghdad, and Mosul, were merged by the British and named the Mandate of Mesopotamia, which later became Iraq. This unification, despite the presence of diverse religious and cultural groups within these provinces, sowed the seeds of future instability within Iraq. Mosul was predominantly Sunni Muslims, while Baghdad had a Shia Muslims majority, and Basra housed a significant Shia population. Following World War I, the British officially annexed Kuwait, separating it from Basra province and maintaining a protectorate over it until 1960. However, Iraq viewed this separation as illegitimate and later claimed Kuwait as its territory, leading to Saddam Hussein's invasion in 1990. Despite gaining independence from Britain, Iraq remained a fragmented nation. Internal tensions simmered between Kurds, Sunnis, and Shias, further complicated by Iraq's claim on Kuwait. Similar mistakes were made in the creation of Lebanon and Syria. Lebanon was granted independence despite a significant Christian population alongside Sunni and Shia Arabs. Likewise, Syria, which also housed Christians, Sunnis, Shias, and other religious groups, was formed by merging Ottoman provinces in an attempt to maintain stability. In 1930, Turkey demanded the Hatay province from French-controlled Syria. Fearing an alliance between Turkey and Nazi Germany, France ceded the Hatay province to Turkey, creating a new source of tension between Syria and Turkey. Additionally, the Euphrates River, which originates in Turkey and flows through Syria and Iraq, presented a potential water conflict between the three countries. Syria gained independence from France in 1946, but the newly independent nation immediately began laying claim to Hatay province in Lebanon. These conflicts arose partly from the arbitrary borders drawn to maintain peace and partly from the discovery of oil and resource-rich regions already grappling with religious and cultural tensions. For example, Iraq's oil reserves were located in Basra and Mosul, areas inhabited by Shia Arabs and Sunni Kurds, respectively. The rest of Iraq was predominantly Sunni Arab. This ethnic and religious makeup presented a challenge for managing Iraq's oil resources. Similarly, in Iran, 90% of the oil came from Kurdistan, a Shia Arab-dominated region, while the rest was located in Kuwait, which Iraq already considered its territory. The discovery of oil in this region further exacerbated tensions between Iraq and Kuwait. Significantly, a vast portion of the world's oil reserves were concentrated in the Middle East, often overlapping with existing religious and cultural fault lines. This confluence of factors further complicated the region's already volatile situation. Major powers like the United States also entered the fray, worsening the situation in the Middle East. To fulfill their promise to the Jewish people, the British established the State of Israel in Palestine. At the time, the Arab population in Palestine nearly doubled the Jewish population. However, the partition plan allocated 62% of the land to the Jews and only 38% to the Arabs, creating a conflict that continues to this day. The proposed partition was rejected by the Arabs, while the Jews understandably accepted it. Initially, no Arab state recognized Israel, and most declared war in 1948. With British and American support, Israel, surrounded by Arab states, emerged victorious. This marked the beginning of the story of Gamal Abdel Nasser, a secular Arab nationalist leader of Egypt who envisioned a united Arab superstate wielding the region's oil as a weapon. Nasser understood how external powers use their oil reserves to manipulate Arab nations. He believed that a united Arab state could use its own oil reserves as leverage against Israel and the United States. Upon coming to power in 1954, Nasser rallied Arab states against the US, Israel, and the Saudi and Kuwaiti dynasties that supported them. His first move was to nationalize the Suez Canal, previously owned by Britain and France. This action provoked retaliation from these countries and Israel, but Egypt emerged victorious and regained control of the Suez Canal. Nasser's success sparked fear among some Arab states, particularly Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Jordan, and Iran, who worried that his revolution could spread and threaten their own monarchies. This fear fueled a proxy war in Yemen between Nasser-backed nationalists and the royalist government supported by Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Iran. This marked the first proxy war in the Middle East, and Egypt ultimately suffered a significant defeat. Seeing an opportunity, Israel launched a surprise attack on Egypt to avenge their previous defeat. Known as the Six-Day War, this attack resulted in the capture of the entire Sinai Peninsula by Israel, effectively blocking passage through the Suez Canal for the next 8 years. The defeat was a heavy blow for Egypt's President Gamal Abdel Nasser, who died of a heart attack in 1970. Anwar Sadat, Nasser's successor, sought to reclaim lost territory. In 1973, Egypt and Syria launched a coordinated surprise attack on Israel, known as the Yom Kippur War. While Israel ultimately prevailed, the United States intervened and brokered a peace agreement between Egypt and Israel. This agreement stipulated the return of the Sinai Peninsula to Egypt in exchange for Egypt's recognition of Israel as a state. Sadat's decision to recognize Israel was met with hostility from other Arab states who viewed it as a betrayal. This culminated in his assassination by an Islamist group in 1981. Concurrently with the events in Egypt, Iran underwent a revolution that toppled the Shah, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, who was seen as a puppet of the United States. The new regime, led by Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, established an Islamic republic and aimed to unite all Muslims under its banner. This vision posed a threat to Sunni-majority Arab states, particularly Saudi Arabia, which enjoyed American support. Fearing the spread of the Iranian Revolution, Saudi Arabia began funding Saddam Hussein, a Sunni military leader in Iraq. In 1980, Iraq invaded Iran, capturing oil-rich Khuzestan province. The war dragged on for 8 years, resulting in significant casualties. Saudi Arabia and Kuwait continued to support Iraq financially throughout the conflict. After 8 years of stalemate, Iran managed to recapture Khuzestan province. However, in 1988, Iraq revived an old claim on Kuwait, demanding that Kuwait either provide further financial assistance, forgive past debts, or merge with Iraq. When Kuwait refused, Iraq invaded and occupied the entire country, significantly increasing its oil reserves. This act of aggression alarmed Saudi Arabia, which had previously supported Iraq. Fearing an attack on its own oil fields, Saudi Arabia sought help from the United States. The American military intervened, driving Iraqi forces back to Iraq and establishing a presence in the region. The increased American presence in the Middle East, coupled with Israel's continued existence, fueled the rise of militant Islamic organizations such as Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Hezbollah, and Islamic Jihad. These groups aim to unite Muslims against the United States, Israel, and their allies. The actions of these militant groups have resulted in ongoing violence throughout the Middle East. Hamas rocket attacks on Israel have led to Israeli military responses in Gaza. Yemeni militants have targeted ships traversing the Red Sea that belong to Israel or its supporters. Hezbollah and other organizations have also engaged in similar attacks. The complex web of historical events has left the Middle East in a state of perpetual conflict. It remains to be seen how these issues will be resolved and whether peace can ultimately be achieved in the region. That's all from my side, guys. If you found the video informative, then please do like and share my content.